Duncan said the administration hopes Congress will pass the measure this year. And we sample two among many reactions to the president's plan now with Bob Wise, president of the policy group Alliance for Excellent Education. He served as governor of West Virginia from 2001 to 2005. And Diane Ravitch, an education historian, official in the education department of the first Bush administration, and author most recently of The Death and Life of the Great American School System. Bob Wise, starting with you as a general matter first, does the approach of President Obama and Secretary Duncan make sense?
It moves us towards the significant upgrade that's required of No Child Left Behind. No Child Left Behind, 10 years ago almost, did some positive things, forced us to look at the standards that we were setting for our children to learn, forced us to use data in a significant way, and for the first time focused a clear eye on the achievement gaps of many of our students. Now, having said that, it also has a number of shortcomings that increasingly have become revealed. It does not provide the flexibility needed to deal with many of these situations. And from my organization's standpoint, it really didn't deal with high schools. You've got a third of our kids dropping out of high school every year, and yet No Child Left Behind really had very limited ability and means to help that situation.
All right, we'll come back to some of those details. Diane Ravitch, first, as a general proposition, what do you make of the president's plan?
I think it's an improvement over No Child Left Behind, which I believe was, in retrospect, has been a disaster. But I don't think that it's gone far enough in separating itself from No Child Left Behind. It is very closely tied in many of its assumptions to No Child Left Behind. The strictures that will be applied to the lowest performing schools are very punitive, and it really provides very little in the way of support for low performing schools, only punishment.
You were known, Ms. Ravitch, as a supporter early on of No Child Left Behind, have been speaking against it, and you just did so. So expand a little bit here about what did you learn along the way that made it not work and that needs to be addressed now?
Well, No Child Left Behind did encourage schools to teach to the test, only to basic skills, and it created a disincentive for teaching about history and the arts and science and geography, civics, anything except the basic skills. The actual improvement as a result of No Child Left Behind testing was very slight. In fact, there was much more progress made before No Child Left Behind was adopted than since it was enacted.
And Bob Wise, I want to draw out a little bit more about what you see the gains here from No Child Left Behind.
Well, it's very interesting. It's Dr. Ravitch and I come from different points of view originally because she was a proponent of No Child Left Behind, and I was an opponent who, as a governor, seriously considered filing suit to enjoin it. Decided not to, and I'm glad I did. What No Child Left Behind did was, I think, to force us to come to grips with some things that we were able to ignore. But what it also did was to set up today's discussion, which is critically important, because what it showed was when you gave states the ability, each state to set its own standards, we got, as we expected, 50 different sets of standards, and they're moving in different directions. And what the states have actually come together, and 48 of them at least, and said, no, what we need is a common set of standards. No Child Left Behind also did not provide enough tools, did not provide the flexibility to deal with a number of the situations, particularly in the low-performing schools. I agree with Dr. Ravitch that there's still some limitation in the President's proposal, but I also want to say there are a lot more tools in the toolbox in the blueprint that's been issued than previously existed under No Child Left Behind.
Let me just stay with you on one area. I mean, one of the things, as we said in the setup, is there more focus here, or the emphasis is on what they're calling a complete education. That is beyond math and science, for one thing, and more freedom for the school districts to measure what is progress. Is that a good idea? Is that a good approach?
I think it is, and I think it's also important is that the blueprint envisions, as I read it, that not just schools will be held accountable, that recognizing everybody needs to be in this pool, and so therefore school districts and states will also be part of this, as opposed to simply honing in on the school and saying you're good or bad.
Diane Ravitch, what do you see in terms of the more flexibility? It's not completely clear how that works yet, but the idea of giving more flexibility to the school districts to measure the progress.
I think that schools that are doing a good job or that have high test scores in math and in reading, not math and science, in math and reading, because everyone will continue to be tested in basic skills. In that sense, it's still tied to No Child Left Behind. The higher performing schools will be left alone, which will make a lot of people happy, but the lower performing schools, particularly those in the bottom 5%, and then an additional 5 to 10 to 15% are going to be very unhappy because they're going to worry about falling into that bottom 5% The punishments there are draconian. What the federal government is saying is the lowest performing schools, regardless of the reasons for their low performance, will fire the principal, close the school, turn the school into a charter school, turn the school over to the state, turn it over to a private management organization. All of these very punitive approaches have no basis in experience. There's no district that's done these things. We have no examples of a state takeover that have produced a successful school. The charter schools range from excellent to absolutely awful, and on average are no better than regular public schools. So the federal law, as they're proposing it, offers no remedies. It just offers punishments. And I think that they should be offering support and evaluate the specifics of each school. Why is the school low performing? It may be that the kids don't speak English and they need more help in learning to speak English, and not to have the principal fired, the staff laid off, and the school closed.
What do you think about this, Bob Wise, for the lower performing schools, especially this emphasis on very strong measures that can be taken by the states? And of course, the one that's got a lot of attention is the firing of teachers. The president got into a little kerfluffle over this a few weeks ago.
Well, first let's recognize that when we're talking about the 5%, the lowest performing schools, this is a vast improvement over No Child Left Behind, which tended to take a blunderbuss and look at all schools. The second is, even with these four measures that are referred to here, those provide more flexibility than NCLB. And my guess is that when this all comes out, there will be more flexibility. But I think it also ought to be pointed out that this blueprint envisions for these schools and others, following up on the race to the top proposal that's in the stimulus package, in which you can also have innovation grants, you can have other measures that are positive in incentives. So yes, certainly a lot to be discovered, or a lot to be reviewed yet on the bottom 5%, but as we work on that second 5% that Dr. Ravitch referred to, there's a third category, the middle performing schools, and then the top performing schools, a lot more flexibility, and a lot of, as no student comes to school the same, no two schools are the same. And this, I believe that this blueprint at least starts us in the direction of recognizing those differences. Your
sense, though, is that the striking the balance of carrot and stick is pretty close.
I think it's a lot more carrot than it used to be. And in terms of high schools, where we work so much, with only 10% of Title I dollars going to high schools, what we found under No Child Left Behind is there effectively were no carrots for high schools. And we think that this proposal, where the dropout problem, with high school being the jumping off spot for college or career, we think that this proposal far improves what is in or not in No Child Left Behind.
And Diane Ravitch, some of the teachers' unions came out very critical right off the bat there. Is part of your critique supporting what they're worried about? That I think it was Randy Weingarten of the American Federation of Teachers. She says it appears to place 100% of responsibility on educators and give them 0% authority. Is she right?
Well, you know, I'm not sure if she's right or not. What I do think, though, is that it will create a disincentive for anyone to want to teach in a low-performing school, because those schools will all be on the chopping block, and no good teacher is going to want to teach in a school that's targeted for closure or for being turned into a privately managed school. I think these are all the wrong sticks. It's nice to have carrots, but there are way too many sticks, and this is not the way to improve education, particularly when none of these measures have any track record of success.
We, just in our last minute here, Bob, I mean, you both know that there are many voices here, but a lot of people are going to weigh in on this. What happens next? Is it possible to turn the system or change the system?
Well, I think it essentially has to, because if No Child Left Behind is permitted to exist after 2010, then what happens is we keep the same law and we keep the same, what we all agree is a structure that significantly needs upgrading. No Child Left Behind is a compact disc in an iPod world. It significantly needs an upgrade. It has to, and if we don't, then the initiatives, in which some of which are very positive and provide carrots, such as in Race to the Top initiatives, and 40 states have now applied for some of these incentives, they will go away. So this is the only way that we can continue in a much more positive direction, is by changing No Child Left Behind, reauthorizing this new Elementary and Secondary Education Act, and working on some of the issues that Dr. Ravitch and I have identified here.
All right, we'll leave it there. Bob Wise and Diane Ravitch, thank you both very much.
Thank you.